Okay, so equivalent ratios are ratios that are equal. And to make equivalent ratios, you multiply or divide both sides of the ratio by the same whole number. Okay, so it's like when we did equivalent fractions, but just set up as ratios now. So not all ratios will you be able to divide, okay, but the examples I gave in the slideshow, you can. The only time you can't divide both sides is if it's already in its lowest form, okay, which this one isn't. So for example, the multiplying should always be the easiest because you can literally take any whole number besides 1, so 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. And as long as you multiply both sides by that same number, you're going to end up with an equal ratio. Okay, so in class we would often say 2 is the easiest whole number typically to multiply by, just double it. Some people like to multiply by 5 or by 10. It's just whatever you want to do. So for example, I can do 2. So you can always multiply both sides of a ratio by 2 and you'll end up with an equal ratio. So 16 times 2 is 32 and 8 times 2 is 16. Okay, so that would be one for multiplying. Again, I could multiply by any other whole number. So I could multiply both sides by 10 and get an equal ratio. So 16 times 10 is 160, 8 times 10 is 80. So again, the number of equivalent ratios by multiplying is infinite. It just goes on and on and on. Division's a little different. So now we need to divide this to get an equivalent ratio. So you need to come up with a whole number that 16 and 8 can be divided by. Well, so this is where you have to think about groups, okay? Anytime you have two even numbers can always be divided by 2. They can always be halved, right? So I can divide 16 by 2 and 8 by 2. 16 divided by 2. So if you weren't sure how to do that, right, you'd have to draw out two groups and you'd have to put 16 dots and then see how many dots end up in each group, okay? Or if you have to use your calculator, then you can do that. So half of 16 is 8 and half of 8 is 4. So 16 to 8 is equal to 8 to 4 ratio. I could also divide 16 and 8 by other whole numbers. So 16 and 8 can also both be divided by 4. 16 divided by 4 is 4, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. Okay, so there's lots of possibilities. Do the multiplying first because you can always find whole numbers to multiply by, and then work on the division. So like I said, you might have to draw groups to help with the division until you find a number that can go in. Or you can try some different numbers on your calculator by dividing. Okay, so I'll do one more question here. So a question like 3 to 9 equals, okay? So again, multiplication, no problem. Multiply both sides by 3 if you want, and you've got an equal ratio. So 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 times 3 is 27. So 3 to 9 is equal to 9 to 27. Dividing though, so now I've got to come up with a number that 3 and 9 can be divided by. Well, if you think 3 is a pretty small number, if you divide it by 2, you're going to get a decimal, 1.5. We don't like decimals when we're doing ratios. Okay, so the only other number you can divide 3 by is itself, 3. So if this was your ratio and I said make me a ratio by dividing, you would divide both sides by 3. So if you're stuck and you're like, well, I don't think there is a possibility, make sure you've tried dividing the number by itself, and then you should be able to get it. Okay, so that's a quick video that goes over a little bit more of equivalent ratios.